Our guides have gone rogue. This is not on the itinerary. Okay, who's in? Everybody's hands shot up. Not just New Zealand's, but the world's tallest commercially navigable waterfall in the world. 21 feet tall. Yikes. And I'm about to plunge over it in a raft. Bill and I sit in the front of the raft and give each other a holy blank look. Just before the fall, Hamish, our river guide, grabs some branches overhanging the river and pulls us to a stop. He looks us all once more and then yells, "Get down!" So we tuck down into the bottom of the raft just like he trained us. I take one last peek before we head over the falls. I hope this isn't my last. It's too late, baby, now. We're going over the fall. Every time I think New Zealand can't get any better, she proves me wrong. I've been in New Zealand now for 3 weeks, and it truly does get better and better. Today, I'm going to tell you about some of my highlights of my whole trip, this time on the North Island. Welcome to the Active Travel Adventures podcast. I'm your host, Kit Parks, and today we're going to conclude my 3-part series on my adventures in New Zealand. I spent a month there. The first week I was traveling solo on my own. Then I joined the Active Adventures tour on their South Island adventure for 2 weeks. And I was having such a good time that even though my 4th and final week I was planning to travel solo again, I found out that several of my travel mates were going to be going to the North Island to catch the back end of another Active Adventures tour. And I looked at the itinerary and I said, I think that's going to be a lot more fun. I was having such a good time with Active and with the group that I was like, no way. I may never come back to New Zealand again. I'm going. So even though I had to eat some Airbnb costs and a puddle jumper flight and all that kind of stuff, it was worth it for me to go ahead and go on this tour. After listening, I think you'll agree. So let's get started. Like my South Island adventure, this final week is going to be multi-adventure of different sports. Not only are we going to be doing lots of hiking, including the famous Tongariro Alpine Crossing, we're also going to be visiting a Maori village and learn more about the culture and join them in one of their welcoming ceremonies and then have one of their famous feasts. We will be exploring the coastlines, volcanoes, a completely different landscape than the South Island, totally different. We'll be mountain biking, and wait till you hear me pronounce this, the Wairere Forest. I think I got that somewhat right. It's got lots of letters in it. We'll be tubing in the Waitomo Caves, and that was super cool. I can't wait to share that with you. And once again, not only do we go rogue on a rafting trip over the tallest waterfall in the world that you can raft over, we go rogue once again in something that I'm glad I did it, but don't think I'll do it again. Like I said, the landscape is completely different between the South Island and the North Island, and this is due to the tectonic plate activity, the volcanic activity. In the South, the tectonic plates push together and go upwards, so you have these beautiful, massive mountains. However, in the North, they slide under each other, and this causes the land to look alive, similar to what I saw in Iceland. If I understand this right, in the South, the pressure builds until there's an earthquake to release that pressure, whereas in the North Island, because of the sliding tectonic plates, the gases are constantly being released up. And so it looks sometimes, like in this particular town we're going to go to, like a bomb just hit it because steam is just erupting from the soil. It's really cool and otherworldly. So I have joined the back half of Active Adventures Kari Tour. They offer that as a 5 or 11-day tour, so I'm doing the last 5 days. We meet our guides, Joe and Andy, in Auckland at our downtown hotel, and then head away from the bustling city to Te Aroha for a wee hike and a picnic. Te Aroha is one of the country's top tourist spots, celebrated for its natural hot soda waters and Mokena geyser. I learned that Joe's idea of a wee hike and mine are dramatically different. I find it a challenging, beautiful, but certainly not a quote-unquote wee little hike. And I love it. We are engulfed in a lush, moss-dotted forest. It's about 1,000 foot of elevation gain over numerous stream bridges to get to a lookout platform at the base of the Wairere Falls on the Akaui fault line for a dramatic and panoramic view of the city down below. It's hard to believe it could be so remote, yet so close to New Zealand's largest city that has over 1.5 million residents. I'm happy that I'm starting to recognize some of the birds and their calls now, especially since Janice and Mike treated MJ to a bird called CD on our South Island tour. On the bus, MJ and I loved listening to the CD, but apparently the rest were not as engaged. Right, Bill, Carol, and Manny? When we get back down off the mountain, Joe prepares a tasty picnic for us in the little park in the town center that has remnants of an old thermal bath and still the occasional geyser. After lunch, we hit the road and I'm introduced to marshmallow farms. The hayfield has been collected, and the white plastic-covered bales scattered across the fields do indeed look like monstrous marshmallows. I taste the famous manuka honey on the South Island, but now I learn that tea tree oil comes from that same manuka tree. And now I start to believe all those medicinal promises I was told. My friend Alan had insufferable psoriasis, and nothing would help. Then he tried tea tree oil, and it magically went away. We get out for another hike. This time to hike the Mountain of Love and see the North Island's tallest waterfall at 154 meters or around 500 feet. And it's gorgeous. And I'll bet there's been many a proposal here. On the way down, we jumped into a river for a brisk but refreshing swim. While we'd seen a few other hikers, we had the river to ourselves. Pinch me. I am swimming in a river in a forest in New Zealand. Now fresh and somewhat clean from our wee swim, we head to Rotorua, in the heart of New Zealand's Maori culture, and the spiritual home of New Zealand's Tangata Whenua, the original people of the land. The Maori, pronounced kind of like Maori, not Maori, the way it's spelled, M-A-O-R-I. The Maori are the original people from eastern Polynesia, and they arrived by canoe somewhere around 1250 to 1300. Isolated, they developed new customs, a new language, a rich mythology, and distinct crafts and performing arts. I'm going to paraphrase Leanna's telling of the Maori origin story. And as you may recall, Leanna was one of our guides on the South Island. The legend of Ranginui, Sky Father, and Papatuanuku, Earth Mother, explains the creation of life in Maori culture. Sky Father and Earth Mother lie locked together in a tight embrace, with their many children wedged in between them in a world of eternal darkness. One day, by chance, the children experienced light that escaped from under Rangi's armpit as he rolled over, and they became resentful. One son, Tane Muhutar, the god of the birds in the forest, proposed a way to bring forth light to their world and separate their parents forever. And he did so by lying on his back with his feet pressed up against Sky Father Rangi to thrust him into the sky for life, therefore allowing light into the world. Rotorua, on a massive lake of the same name, and with apologies to the Maori people for presumably botching the pronunciation, the full Maori name is Te Rotorua Nui a Kahumata Mo Moe. We get out to explore the town of Rotorua. While the building looks fine, I get the feeling that the town has just been bombed. There's steam erupting from fissures all over the place, plus steaming mud pools as well. One hotel had to close down due to the steam fissures. I see a fence that doesn't look like it's going to be around very long, and there's a crack with steam spurting up out of it. Surely this is going to rot it. There is steam emanating from people's front and backyards. Sometimes you get the faint rotten egg smell that you get from hydrogen sulfide. Harmless, but it's a little unpleasant. Rotorua sits over the Rotorua caldera. In fact, there are 17 calderas in the area. A caldera is formed from a volcano where, after the eruption, the volcano collapses on itself to form a crater. Here, the oceanic crust is just a few meters below. Because the steam is coming out from all over the place, there's no fear of another eruption because of the lack of the pressure buildup. And the good news is, because of all this thermal energy pushing out from the soil, heat is a cheap commodity. Some areas are closed off due to the steam. I learned later that night that in order to protect ignorant visitors who insist on ignoring the posted warning signs, some of the more dangerous fissures are closed off to all but the Maori people because they know better. These pools can reach temperatures of 200 to 250 degrees, so you need to know which ones are safe. I've got some cool video that I'll post on site at activetraveladventures.com/NZ3 for New Zealand 3. In downtown Rotorua, to me, the attractive Swiss Tudor looking like Rotorua Museum of Art and History looks a bit out of place with the surrounding architecture. Rotorua has been a popular spa town since the 1800s, and this beautiful old building reminds us of its history. If time permits, visit the museum to learn more about the Maori people and their musket wars. It's been an interesting day filled with landscape contrasts and history. Our lodge by the lake has a laundry. Yay! And I'm pretty sure my travel mates are glad that I found a laundry as well. In our rooms, there's a notice to keep the windows closed and the lights off at night because of trout flies. Carol forgot, and when we got back from dinner, her bathroom was covered in these black flies. I don't think they bite, and it was funny for us. Not so funny for Carol, Bill, and the poor manager on duty who eradicated them. With all the steam coming out, you'd think the land is barren. Not. At 5:30 in the morning, I get a vocal wake-up call from the many birds. I peek out, and it's drizzling a bit. This will make for perfect mountain biking weather. The Wairere Forest has over 130 kilometers of bike trails to suit all skill levels. The forest itself is beautiful with tall upright trees and little undergrowth, so you can really see into the forest. The area is world-renowned for its mountain biking trails, and I can see why. I'm already getting a little bit twitchy today because we're doing real mountain biking, not the gentle biking that I did to Wanaka on the last episode. They've got single-track courses, and I'm reliving my Umstead State Park trauma all over again. If I want to be a wuss, I could opt out and just soak in the mineral spas. But I decide I'm going to flex my courage muscles and do it. We head to this really cool bike rental place that has a coffee truck outside and grab a cup of coffee while we're getting fitted for our bikes and helmets and get some instructions. Silly people, these bikes cost about $3,000 and they're going to let me pedal it? This is not my $15 Huffy bike. In the parking lot, a group of about 30 people over 60 are meeting up for a communal ride. They call themselves the Wrinkled Riders. I'm encouraged. If they can do it, I can do it. Our guide is smart. I'm sorry I don't remember his name, so I'm just going to call him Larry. Larry has us practice in the parking lot before we head out, and then he takes us to the equivalent of the bunny hill to assess us. While the trails are marked, they do intersect others, so I'm glad we have a guide. If not, make sure you do take a map because it could be easy to get lost in there. And actually, we do find a junior high kid who got separated from his teacher. But this is a well-used area, so you can't be alone too long, I'm sure. And I'm sure the teacher was chagrined to lose one of his students out in the forest. Our group aces what I call the bunny hill or the beginner trails. And there were families out, there were small children as young as 3 zooming along with their little training wheels. These trails are flat, wide, and smooth. Satisfied with our performance, Larry moves us up to the easy trails. Now we're starting to get some mild hills, but the tracks are still smooth and there's not much we can run into. Aced it again. I'm starting to feel confident in this mountain biking thing. So Larry says we're ready for the intermediate trails now. Now we've got some steeper hills and the track is no longer smooth. There's roots and rocks and some tighter turns. I might be lacking in the back with our backup guide, who's very encouraging, but I think I'm holding my own. But remember too, I'm with Carol, Bill, and Manny. These are the crazy ones who did all the wacky adrenaline things in Queenstown and apparently lack some kind of a fear bone. These guys are just zooming down the track. We cross streams with wooden bridges, and these bridges don't have any guardrails. And I have to remind myself, I know how to ride a bike in a straight line. Concentrate, kid. Look ahead, not to the right, not to the left. You can do this. It's near the end of our time in the forest, and Larry decides we can handle one of the more challenging of the intermediate trails. I'm having fun. Sometimes I twitch a little bit going downhill or in a tight turn, but I think I'm game. I'm up for this. Things are going pretty well, and up ahead everyone's stopped. Larry gives us a briefing on an upcoming bend. Okay, I want you to picture this. There's a red clay ravine. It's about 4 feet high and about 3 or 4 feet wide. The tree trunks and the rocks are about head level because you're sitting down in the ravine on your bicycle. Now make the trail go downhill about 15 feet at a 45-degree angle. Yep, that's steep. It's going right downhill. And then at the very bottom of that 15 feet, make a 300-degree turn, almost a complete U-turn, like a paperclip turn, and you can't put on the brakes, or if you go too slow, you're going to tip over. Larry, of course, shows us how it's done, piece of cake. One by one, my group goes. Fearless Carol aces it. So does Bill. So does Manny. Now it's just me. And the 4 of them are down there watching me. I never like that. And they're encouraging me. I'm trying to convince myself I can do it. I finally muster up the courage, and off I go. Focus straight ahead. Don't look down. Don't look at that scary bend. Focus, kid. Focus. Have confidence in yourself. You can do this. You cross that bridge fine, right? Right? You can do this. You can do this. You can do this. Go. Rats. I didn't do it. I wish I could tell you that I didn't tip over, but my self-preservation fear of crashing into that ravine wall at the bend just rattled me. I went way too slowly, brakes were on way too much, and the inertia, I just fell gently over onto the right wall, into that ravine. Completely not hurt. I wasn't going fast enough to hurt myself. And I do believe that if I tried it again, I would have been able to do it. I may not have made that turn without tipping, but I was still proud of myself for getting out there and trying. And I discovered that I actually like mountain biking, and I want to do it again. Joe has made us a delicious picnic buffet, which we eat on a table outside the bike rental place. Everyone's in good spirits from the really fun morning, and I think that doing this mountain biking is one of my highlights on a trip that's very difficult to choose a favorite. I've come to realize that we get the most satisfaction when we step outside of our comfort zone and stretch our courage muscles and grit bones. I wish we could go back out after lunch again and ride some more. After lunch, we head to Te Aroha, a small town with massive geothermal activity. Even though there's an extensive visitor center and live exhibits of the geysers, springs, steams, and mud pools, the area outside is pretty much undeveloped bush, allowing for the native wildlife to flourish. Local Maori believe, and I agree, that mineral springs, mud, and steam baths have healing properties, and they incorporate this natural phenomena into their daily lives. After cleaning up back at the lodge, we head to Te Aroha, a Maori cultural center at the local Te Aroha tribe in Rotorua. I think I've got it right that the Te Aroha is one of 8 tribes who arrived in canoes and scattered across New Zealand. The Te Aroha Cultural Center is a massive undertaking. We have an appointed time to visit a meeting room to see some traditional dance and hear music and chants. In the meantime, we can explore the exhibits and grounds, including the impressive entrance to Te Aroha Heketanga Arangi, which translate as Heavenly Origins, a contemporary Maori artwork. In this huge outdoor patio entrance, it is surrounded by 12 massive totem pole-like carvings which represent celestial Maori guardians. Carvings and weavings were the Maori's first written language. Maori architecture is beautiful and meaningful. Everything tells a story. Later, in the meeting house, we sit and the Maori are on stage. As is custom when visitors visit another tribe, one man is selected from our group to represent us, the visitors. He does his duty with the leader of the tribe, and we are officially welcomed to the meeting house. One of my best photos is of a warrior dancer. In dance, the Maori often stick out their tongues with manic bulging eyes in an effort to show you they are strong and fearsome. I nailed the perfect picture, and you can see it on site at the website at activetraveladventures.com/NZ3 for New Zealand 3. After the ceremony, women volunteers are encouraged to go on stage to learn a female dance with these balls and a string that you flip and you twirl. I can't dance, flip, or twirl, and as you know, I also can't sing, but I volunteered anyway. Like I always say, try to say yes to everything, particularly if it makes you a little bit uncomfortable. It was fun, and everybody had a few laughs. Later, we watched a demonstration of how the Maori cook a traditional feast called a hangi. You make a hangi by wrapping food and burying it in a pit over hot stones, which almost steams it, making for a delicious and healthy way to cook. The Maori were justly proud when we indulged in a massive buffet of both traditional hangi food plus a variety of more recognizable dishes, including abundant seafood, naturally since we're next to a lake. The buffet table is about 50 feet long. Incredible. We'd been working our bodies pretty hard lately, so we all overindulged. The next day, our guides have gone rogue. This is not on the itinerary. Okay, who's in? Everybody's hands shot up. Not just New Zealand's, but the world's tallest commercially navigable waterfall in the world. 21 feet tall. Yikes. And I'm about to plunge over it in a raft. I love whitewater rafting, and I've been fortunate enough to have rafted 2 of the most beautiful rafting runs in the world. The Tully in Australia, episode number 4, and the Paquari in Costa Rica, episode number 15. I'll put links in the show notes. The run we're doing today, the Kaiatuna, is about the same with mostly class 2 and 3 rapids and the occasional class 4. The mega waterfall is what makes this run a standout. It starts out normal enough. We're surrounded by lush forest, and we have the opportunity in the columns between the rapids to appreciate the beauty of the fern-filled rainforest. But up just a ways, our guide, Hamish, grabs onto a rope or a tree branch or something on the bank to stop us. As he clings to the branch on the bank, I realize we're just below the fall. We wonder if this was such a great idea after all. Bill and I sit in the front of the raft and give each other a wholly blank look. Hamish then looks us over one last time and then yells, "Get down!" So we tuck down into the bottom of the raft just like he trained us. I take one last peek before we head over the falls. I hope this isn't my last. It's too late, baby, now. We're going over the fall. We're over in a few long seconds. The raft plunges under the water, and I'm thinking, hey, wait, we watched these folks yesterday, and they didn't go under. But the force of the water entering the raft sloshes me out of it, and I cling to the side rope with my left hand while clenching my paddle with the right. That was the most fun thing I have ever done, bar none. I'm going to post a bunch of photos of this on the website because they have a photographer that catches it. I tell you, it's classic. You see the raft. My raft mates and Hamish are in a collective cheer of success, right? They don't even realize that Bill and I are gone. You see in the background, they're in the front just celebrating all that. Bill is in the background. All you see is his fist cleaning the paddle coming out of the water with me barely hanging on to the side of the raft in the front. And you only see me only if you squint. And I'm going to put another funny shot of Bill. He's literally being flipped out of the raft like he's doing a cartwheel out of the raft. It's priceless. So I'm going to put that one in there too. Even though the fall is really tall, it falls into this really large protected pond-like area that's got still water and it's so deep there's no bulging rocks or anything you can bang your head on. So your PFD, or your personal flotation device, is going to keep you above the water. So it's really pretty safe. I want to do that again. That was a blast. So after laughing and celebrating, and eventually, of course, I get back in the raft, we continue down the river, and Hamish has one more little trick up his sleeve. There's one rapid that we go over. Fun, right? But then Hamish has us turn around and go into it. I guess it's, instead of a rapid, I guess it's more like a short but wide waterfall than a rapid. And we sloosh into it over and over and over again. It's such fun, and you could see our utter joy and glee on our faces in the photos that the raft company very smartly has a photographer at some of these critical junctures. And if I had to rank my rafting adventures by fun, no doubt this is number one. I'd say next would be the Pequari in Costa Rica, and then the Tully in Australia. I cannot believe how many times I've been in a wetsuit this month. I am having the time of my life, and this is the best trip I've ever taken. Next, we hike up 5,000-year-old Rainbow Mountain. This is a now dormant volcano controlled by the Maori people. Even though we're hiking the trails, you could also mountain bike them, and there's also one dedicated Grade 2 bike trail as well. Rainbow Mountain is noted for its colorful soil. Dormant now, the vegetation has returned, and because of geothermal activity, it has some unusual plants that can tolerate these conditions. Where the plants haven't completely overtaken the sides, you still see these unusual rainbow colors, predominantly red. I love looking at glacial lakes even when the glacier is long gone. The fine particulates that are suspended in the water called glacial flour reflect light, and to the human eyes, the watercolor becomes like a unique aqua or emerald color. And along the trail here, there's a nice overlook of one of these lakes. After a 3.5-kilometer trek up a steep ascent, we reach the summit called Tihi o Ruru, meaning owl's perch. We are now at the southernmost reach of one of the local Maori tribes. From here, we can see the vast reforestation efforts of the Kangaroa, once the largest exotic wood forest. The lands below are filled with eucalyptus, large pine and fir that were planted by inmates. Then it's off to Waikato River for a riverside hike to the Hookah Falls. It's a beautiful hour-long hike along the river path that you share with bikes. This powerful river also has a telltale glacial color and is stunning. It also helps create electricity for the area. The Waikato River was once the local highway traversed by canoe, although the fall makes part of that river a bit treacherous for them. Today the canoes are gone, but you can jet boat down the river, which looks like a lot of fun. After hanging out the fall, we regroup and head for a little R&R. We stop in a parking lot and then head to a changing facility to get into our bathing suits so we can take a swim/soak in the chilly Waikato River. But, and here's the good part, here is where the cold Waikato meets the steaming geothermal Otumuheki stream, which flows 1,500 meters from its source to embrace the Waikato. So, you get to choose your temperature and you can move in and out of the cold or the hot as you please. The banks are covered in a rare and super slow growing native fern that can only grow in a geothermal environment. Refreshed, we follow the shoreline of Lake Taupo, New Zealand's largest lake, actually a gigantic volcanic caldera. It erupted 1,800 years ago and is considered the world's biggest eruption. Some believe it may have created the last glacial ice age. The blast, which ejected, picture this, 1,000 cubic kilometers of material it ejects. That means several hundred square miles of the surrounding land just collapsed and formed this caldera, which then filled with water. How cool is that? On the way to our lodge, we drive along the banks of the Tongariro River, New Zealand's most famous trout fishing river. Bet you they got some trout flies. Joe and Andy ask if we want to jump off a cliff. And since they seem to like us all right, we say sure. Remember, always try to say yes. So at a pull-off, they park the van and we walk a short distance to a tall cliff where they both proceed to jump off. I'm going to say this cliff, 30 to 60 feet. I swear, it was tall. Of course, Carol just goes over quickly like a lemming. Here I am, always trying to work on my courage muscles and my grip bone, but Carol seriously needs to work on getting a fear bone. Manny studies a bit more carefully, then he too leaps. This is not on the itinerary. Joe and Andy have gauged this group and they want to maximize our fun and experiences. Okay, so now it's my turn to decide. Remember, I'm not one of your adrenaline junkies. I'm looking over that ledge. That's a long, long way down there. I said, I can see the bottom. Are you sure it's deep enough? And he's like, yeah, just don't dive. I don't know. I don't know how long I stared at that water. But it's a while before I decide whether I'm going to do this. I was more worried that I was going to jump out far enough and I'd somehow get snagged on the vegetation on the side of the cliff. Highly unlikely because it was pretty flat on the way down. But I know I'm a bit of a klutz. I decide, all right, I'm going to do this. So on the count of 5, I leap. And I got this great idea, I think. I decide I'm going to make sure I don't hit the bottom. I'm going to try to ball up a little bit like a cannonball style and hold my nose so the water doesn't go up my nose. So for perspective, the only rock I've ever jumped off was about 10 or 15 feet high. I did that on the Pocari River, and I did that twice. And it was fun, and it was exciting, and I survived both times. So anyway, so I leap, and gratefully, Bill has stayed behind to videotape it, so I got the proof. I'll put that online. I learned a couple things. Number 1, videotape is like TV and adds 10 pounds to you, so remember that when you look at the video. Number 2, doing like a cannonball jump from such a height just about splits your butt cheeks apart on impact. However, I didn't touch the bottom, so I consider that a fair trade. Number 3, you need to consider how to get back up a cliff before jumping off one. Turns out that was the trickiest part. I'm so glad I said yes. Today has been such a magical day, it's going to take a slot in my top 10 favorite days of my life. Can this adventure get any better? We stay by the Tongariro River so that in the morning we can do one of New Zealand's most popular and epic hikes, the Tongariro Alpine Crossing. It's a challenging all-day hike in New Zealand's not only oldest national park, it's the 5th oldest national park in the world. Today's almost 20-kilometer hike is considered the best mountain day hike in the country. While it looks innocent enough, you want to make sure you enter prepared, not just with food and ample water, but with your thermals, your rain gear, etc. The sign gives us a calculator to determine the approximate temperature difference from the start to the summit, and then you add in the wind chill factor. The sign also asks you to make sure you're fit enough for the trek over the mountain, and warns that so far this year, 68 visitors have been rescued. Folks who no doubt underestimated their fitness and or weather that a mountain can make, often with no notice. The final sign tells us that Red Crater is 1,780 meters up and that today's forecast calls for increasing winds and rain as the day progresses. So we're going to need to beat the front. It all starts off mild enough and quite level. We're surrounded by geothermal activity, and although there's an abundance of water, even a river that we're walking alongside, you can't drink it as the heat from the hydrothermal fluids leach minerals, including arsenic, which are toxic to humans. I'll bet the water would also melt your treatment system as well. A volcano eruption decimates the vegetation, and it takes a long time for plants to start growing again on the harsh rubble. The land is filled with plants, but these are still the early pioneers and they're small, grassy, shrubby ground huggers. It's going to be generations before the trees can invade again. This gives us an unobstructed view of the ridgeline. In the distance, we see little ants on top of the ridge. In a few hours, we're going to be ant people too. The level path is about to head upwards, and there's one final warning sign saying, "Stop. Consider turning back. Are you really prepared to continue your alpine trek? Is the weather okay? Do you have the right equipment and clothing? Are you fit enough?" Good questions all, and ones we should ask ourselves every time we climb a mountain. As we have a good weather window, we have the proper gear and clothes, and all of us are fit, we begin our ascent. Overlooking the beautiful Emerald Lake, there's another sign that outlines the different lava flows we see below with their dates: 1975, 1954, 1949, 1870. I don't see any pattern. The sign also tells us what to do in case of an eruption or earthquake. Basically, run! Like I said, the vegetation is pretty low, where there is any. Rugged and beautiful in its own way, like a desert, and it grows anew in its unique beauty. Because of the low vegetation, there's no privacy for a nature call, and this is a popular track. The park has thought of this problem, and after a ways, there's a cluster of porta toilets, and we are happy. This also gives us a chance to stop for a snack and get our thermal jackets. It's pretty nippy on the ridgeline. I feel like I'm Neil Armstrong walking on the moon. The brown, black, and tan rubble is otherworldly at the top. A fog sets in. Or is it a cloud? We are pretty high up, and the land and its hikers look ghostly. Heading back down on the other side of the mountain, we see a triplet of emerald lakes and pose for our success photos. The land on this side is smooth and tan, with these three unusually colored lakes spotting them with a steam-filled backdrop. Super cool. We sit by one of the lakes for our picnic lunch. I've got to say that the guides at Active Adventures, who make most of our meals, take great care to make sure they taste great, are healthy, and they give us variety. While they obviously help each other out, it's one person's main job to drive and the other's to feed us. MJ on the South Island and Joe on the North Island went to great lengths to keep us happily well fed, while Leanna and Andy did the driving and would narrate the backstory and history of some of the places we saw as we drove by. I'm impressed with both teams. On Active Tours, they always have a Kiwi guide plus a local guide, but since we're in the Kiwi land, both sets of our guides are based in New Zealand. Some of these guides then go to Europe, for example, during the Northern Hemisphere summer months, so if I do Mont Blanc, for example, I might get Joe or Andy again as my guide. After lunch, we continue down the volcano and come to a dock hut, or I should say what remains of the hut after the last eruption. It's being preserved as an interpretive exhibit for the future. DOC, as you may recall from a previous episode on New Zealand, stands for Department of Conservation. And they have about 900 huts scattered throughout the country. In this hut, you can see where boulders that spewed out of the volcano landed on the roof and the sides. Big boulders. We're getting near the base, which is good, and I pick up my pace. Black clouds and an occasional thunder boom in the distance. You do not want to be exposed on that ridge in a thunderstorm. A huge, beautiful lake is also in the distance, and we hike down towards it. Every once in a while, I turn around, and I can't believe the mileage we've covered today. I once again see the ant people, and some great gushes of steam emanating from the land. The land is truly alive. Eventually, the trail is no longer barren. We have entered a rainforest. What a remarkable change of scenery. The thermals are long removed, and it's a pleasant temperature. I enjoy hiking solo, though still in my group. I want to memorize everything. This is our last hike on our New Zealand adventure. I come to the last sign on the trail. It's surrounded by ferns. You are now clear of the Lehar hazard zone. A Lehar is like a volcanic avalanche of mud and debris that can occur with or without an eruption. Now that I've passed the sign, I'm out of the volcanic zone and in the clear. A beautiful brook runs along the trail, and I love the sound and the serenity. It's a fitting end to this magnificent trail. I see one last waterfall among the trees, and eventually merge out of the forest into a parking lot. Active has arranged for our lodge keeper to pick us up as our van is at the start of the trail almost 20 kilometers away. And how sweet! He's brought a cooler of beer for a celebratory toast. Beer sure does taste good after a long hike. Everyone's in a good mood as we head back to the lodge. We get cleaned up and meet over at Joe and Andy's cabin for cocktails and our final farewell feast. A fine steak dinner. Joe has gone all out, and there is a wee bit of wine consumed. My funniest and favorite memory of that dinner is the dessert. It was this berry parfait thing, and she was scooping out portions with this large chef knife. And for those of us old enough to remember the 70s Saturday Night Live episodes, that serving inadvertently had the face of a screaming Mr. Bill when he first sees Mr. Sluggo. It still cracks me up every time I see the photo and brings me back to my high school days. My phone tracks my steps. So far in New Zealand, 325,731 steps. I've had time to think about those steps on the necessarily long drive back to Auckland. Trying to see the highlights of a country in a few weeks is difficult at best, but I think by immersing yourself in the landscape as we did by hiking, biking, and paddling our way around the countryside is the perfect way to try to do so. You're not whizzing by the countryside, you become an actual part of it, and indeed part of the locals' lives of those that you meet each day. We stopped to stretch our legs in Te Kuiti in the Waitomo district, the sheep shearing capital of New Zealand. 2 world champs reign from this town, and since 1987, the town has hosted the shearing competition, which now draws shearers from around the world. There is a massive 7-meter, 7.5-ton statue in the local champion shearer's honor. When I was in a really rural part of Australia, my late husband Bill and I stopped in a restaurant on Kangaroo Island. Inside, it was just us and a guy at the bar, so to save the bartender/waitress some steps, Bill went up to the bar to order another beer and started chatting with the cowboy at the bar. The man, a local rancher, invited us to stop by for a glass of wine before we headed out of town. We did, and it was so cool to see an Australian ranch up close. Plus, he was a gardener, and me as a plant lover, I was thrilled to be able to ask someone so knowledgeable about his landscape. Well, here's what's even more cool. That day was also shearing day for the lambs, and he took me to go see. Picture a big barn. On the right-hand side of the barn, there's this like a big pet door, kind of a door, and so the lambs channeled through this door, and a shearer would grab it and shave off the wool before the lamb even knew it hit it, and then it'd get released. A few minutes later, it shoots out another on the left side pet door, is out in the yard, looking around like, what the just happened? And then it would shake itself back to reality and then scamper off to be with its friends. It was hysterical, and the expressions on the lambs' faces were priceless. Shearing is a remarkable feat of endurance, and they have to do it all day, and they travel from ranch to ranch to ranch during the shearing season. A sign of the Te Kuiti tells us that when attempting a world record time for sheep shearing, the contestant's exertion and heart rate is comparable to a back-to-back marathon with a 1.64 liter per minute oxygen intake. In 2017, the record was broken by Matt Smith, who sheared 731 ewes in 9 hours. That's 1 sheep every 1 3/4 minutes. Shearers get paid by the sheep, so naturally speed is important to them. At the time of this recording, they make about $2.50 to about $3 a piece. New Zealand is home to about 32 million sheep, and most produce about 5 kilograms of wool per year, used mainly for rugs, bedding, blankets, and hand knitting yarn. There are almost 7 sheep per person in New Zealand. New Zealand dominates production. However, China's been whacking away at that title recently, and the preponderance of polyester and cotton is also making a mark. Here's a fun story. There's a sheep called Shrek. Once he escaped being sheared, not just once, but he escaped into the hills and was hiding out in caves, and did so for 6 years. When they finally caught up to him and sheared him, he released over 27 grams of greasy wool. The owner said he was unrecognizable as a sheep. You could barely see his face. He became an icon and the hero of children's books and a sensation throughout the country. In one town, there's a huge statue in his honor. I'll put a link to a picture of him on the website. It's pretty funny. Tongariro may have been our last hike, but Active Adventures has one more treat up its sleeve, and I find myself back once again in a wetsuit. We are at the Waitomo Caves and get fitted in our suits, neoprene booties, and a snug helmet with a headlamp. As instructed, I select an inner tube that fits my butt and doesn't fall off when I bend over. What are we going to be doing? Then we walk down to the river to practice jumping backwards in the water with a tube on our butt. This is going to be interesting. As our tour guide gives us instructions, she's standing on a pier 10 feet from the ground. I'm thinking, I'm not jumping backwards in that shallow creek from that high up. Fortunately, she's using that pier as a vantage point to teach us, and we walk down to a lower platform a couple feet off the ground for our trials. No problem, I got this. The reason we have to learn how to do this is we're about to go tubing in an underground cave. How cool is that? A river runs through the cave, and it's pitch black. And like usual, I'm near the back of the pack. I asked Manny to stay behind me so I'm not last. I do not want to get lost in this labyrinth, and there's only one guide that I can see, and she's at the front. Our helmets have headlamps, so I'm able to see the nooks and crannies of the rock wall sides of the cave. Every once in a while, there's an opening above, and we can see how far below the surface we are. It's far. This is surreal. And we laugh. At one point, we have to really squeeze ourselves this really, really, really tight opening. And then, okay, here comes the jump. We do a backward jump like we practice on the little waterfall ahead. Hey, that wasn't so bad. The water gets calm so we can float on our tummies for a bit. We are in a cave under the earth. This is so cool. And I got to wondering who on earth first discovered this treat. It must have been super scary until the lay of the land or some kind of a map or whatever in the cave tunnel map was kind of figured out. Caves, as you may or may not know, are not the place to be in a thunderstorm because if the land gets hit by lightning, there's a lot of metal usually in rocks, and therefore caves. So remember this too when you're hiking. You're better to be exposed than inside of a cave in a thunderstorm. The week before, a storm had rolled through, and they had to take the visitors out through their emergency tunnels to the surface. I was glad they had a backup plan figured out. Suddenly, we're asked to stop. Uh-oh. Our little cave jump we did before, that was a baby jump. Here comes the real jump. Now it's time to really put our butt fall training into use. We place our inner tube on our right shoulder. At the waterfall ahead, on one side of the waterfall is a raging current called the Human Blender. Great name. But on the left side where the guide steers us, the water is calmer. We're to put the inner tube over our left shoulder and turn around and hold onto the side of the cave with our right hand and then move the inner tube to our butts and stand with our heels dangling over the ledge over a several foot tall waterfall in the dark on top of a swirling river below. And then I hear the count. 3, 2, 1, jump. And I do. Twitchy? Definitely, but so much fun. In fact, when I think about this trip, I don't recall any time I've done so many fun things in succession. This certainly has not been a typical adventure travel vacation. It has been a fantastic mix of my typical adventures, and we've really gotten to see the different ecosystems in New Zealand, but we've also done so many fun things above and beyond the ordinary. My eyes adjust once more, and we have all safely made our jumps and are floating effortlessly down the dark corridor. Now we're told to form an eel line, and by this I mean that we put our feet on each side of the person's tube in front of us, so we make a human tube chain. They're told to hold on to my feet as I hold on to the feet of the person behind me. And we float like this for a minute, and then we're told to turn off our headlamps and just float in the dark. It's an eerie calm. It's soothing. It's almost like we're in a womb. And we're floating down the cave river. Our eyes adjust, and then we see it. Glowworms. The same kind Leanna showed us in Franz Josef, but instead of dozens, we are looking at millions and millions of glowworms speckled along the top of the cave. It's like looking at a new solar system, a new Milky Way, but without the blue swirls. I am enchanted. No wonder Lonely Planet calls this New Zealand's #1 attraction. Glowworms are actually fly larvae. Good PR from whomever changed the common name. And they have an interesting life. They mate for a solid 48 hours, and not surprisingly, after that, the male dies. Then the female lays over 100 eggs, which again, not surprisingly, she dies. Then, and here's where it gets really interesting, the first egg to hatch eats all of its siblings. And it is its poop that's glowing, and that's what's attracting the bugs. Yes, you heard right. The glowworm has bioluminescent poop. And from this, the worm makes a sticky string like a microscopic Christmas light, and from this string, it catches its prey, which are other bugs that are attracted to the light. It's almost like a vertical spider web, except lit up. In fact, its species name, Boletophila luminosa, means in layman's terms, spider worm lights up. And they are found only in New Zealand. It was worth a long flight just to see them. And then floating on my butt on a river in an underground cave? This is beyond cool. Up ahead, there's a hole in the roof of the cave and we see daylight. We are 60 meters or almost 200 feet underground. Incredible. There's one more tiny hole to squeeze through, and then once again, with headlamps off, we drift down the cave river and eventually see the natural light at the end of the tunnel. Our magical journey is about to end, or so I think. As the eyes adjust and the light grows brighter, we see the roof of the cave is covered in stalactites, those pointy mineral icicles that have formed over the eons. Magical. I am in an earthen cathedral, and I've never seen one so beautiful. We exit the cave back onto the original river and float our way down to the practice jump dock. Showered and dry and our bellies full of some delicious hot soup from the Waitamo Cave Visitor Center, we continue on to Auckland. I hate that this trip is almost over. We arrive Auckland and I'm assaulted by the noise and the crowds. I have culture shock after a month of mostly rural landscapes and small villages. Our group and guides share hugs and emails and we go on our ways. Some head to the airport. I stay one more night and plan to explore the city tonight and tomorrow before my flight. I walk down to the waterfront, but I find the city noise unsettling. Everything seems so loud. For a month I've heard babbling brooks and birdsong. I try to relax and find a quiet place to people watch over a beer, but it's Friday night, so naturally that's not going to happen. The town is alive with people out celebrating the conclusion of the work week. Eventually, I decide that perhaps I'm not quite ready to re-enter the world where these sights and sounds are normal to me. So I end up buying takeaway and a couple of beers and return to the quiet of my room. I'll deal with the world tomorrow. How can I summarize my trip to New Zealand? I've been to around 30 countries last count. I have seen and done some of the most amazing adventures a reasonably fit person can do. People always ask me, what's your favorite place? And I always say something to the effect of, it's like asking me to choose my favorite child. I now have a firm answer. New Zealand. Best for scenery, New Zealand. Best for sheer fun, New Zealand. Best for fun locals, New Zealand. Yes, it's time-consuming to get there. Yes, it can be expensive. But I have learned in my 58 years that it's the experiences in your life that you treasure, never the stuff. Altering my plans to go to the North Island meant that I had to eat one already booked interior plane ticket, and I had to purchase another one. Plus, I lost my prepaid Airbnb accommodations. Plus, I had the cost of paying for an additional active adventure tour. Was it worth it? Darn tootin', in a heartbeat. Not one single ounce of regret. Looking back, I would have regretted keeping my original plan of exploring the cities in my final week. Cities are easy enough to do solo, but it's hard to orchestrate an adventure on your own. The logistics is daunting, plus sometimes it's not smart to do so solo. I know from your emails that New Zealand is on your bucket list. Do it. Book the time, save something every month, and then go. You will not regret it. A few final thoughts on what I learned in New Zealand and about this adventure. 1. Bookend at least a couple of days to decompress before you're thrust back into the real world. If you can afford it, book a spa-cation in your final destination, say Auckland. 2. Cold, as my mother's been trying to tell me, is not my enemy, if I have the right clothes. I lost track of how many times I put on a wetsuit this trip, and I think the water events were the most fun. That, and as always, 3. Push your comfort zone. I am not comfortable mountain biking. I'm always like, where's the safety belt? But that mountain biking day is one of my highlights, especially because I had to stretch my courage muscle. And even though I tipped over, I'm still proud of myself. Always try to +1 outside of your comfort zone. +1 outside of your experiences. You'll get the greatest satisfaction there. I knew I could do the hikes, no problem. The mountain biking and the 21-foot waterfall by raft, nope, I wasn't so sure. I am thrilled I did it. Number 4, when you go on trips like this, you're going to meet some inspirational people who are going to expand your horizons and sometimes challenge your assumptions. Plus, you build up your friendships. I hope that you find active travel adventures, and particularly this New Zealand series, an inspiration for you to lead a bigger life through adventure travel. And I sure hope you've enjoyed this series as much as I've enjoyed reliving my experiences. Don't forget to go to the activetraveladventures.com website. activetraveladventures.com/NZ will get you to the start of the series, and I'll have links to the other pages. I have an expanded selection of photos and videos for you to look at. It's worth it. This trip was amazing. And I hope you've already subscribed to the podcast, but make sure you have, and also make sure you subscribe to my free monthly newsletter so you get the travel planner that I send out for free in my once-a-month email. You don't want to miss this one. It's epic. You could subscribe on the website or just pop me an email at kit@activetraveladventures.com and I'll add you on the list. Remember how I told you that I didn't get to do the first part of the North Island adventure? I did an interview of somebody that did, and also an interview with somebody that did some other parts of New Zealand that I didn't do. I had hoped to include those on this show today, but I just ran out of time. So I'm going to save those for a later date. I've already got several shows already in the system to be coming out over the next couple of months. So sometime this year, I will get out yet another part of New Zealand on adventures that I didn't take, but that I interviewed other people that did do them, so that you get a complete idea of the North Island and some areas of the South Island that I did not do. So I'll hold that off for a little bit later this year. I'm super excited for our next episode. It's going to be the 50th anniversary episode of this show. And so I've got lots of great things planned. I'm super excited to share it with you. This is a huge milestone in the podcast world, and I'm super excited. And I hope to do some fun things. Don't forget, on alternate Thursdays of this program, you can check out the new podcast, Adventure Travel Show Podcast, where you learn the how-tos of adventure travel. So I look forward to seeing you both the upcoming Thursdays, and I sure appreciate you listening. I hope you've gotten as much out of this reliving of my New Zealand experience that I have. I have thoroughly enjoyed this, and I appreciate you listening, appreciate your time, and appreciate you sharing this episode with anybody you think that might enjoy going to New Zealand. Until next time, this is Kit Parks. Adventure on!